Three dreams with a single theme. The first was when I was living in College Station and I was about to leave. I'm 14 to 15. I was inside of a room. My family members were there. We were gathered together for dinner. And while we were eating, I started to have this feeling of something overbearing, of something coming. I got up from the table, and when I got up from the table, I turned towards the window. And the window had nothing. It was just a completely blank slate. And then I walked over to another window, and it was the same thing, except it had a color. It was like a light blue, almost an azure. Then I went to the door to try to get a better look from the outside. And when I stepped outside, the house that I was in completely disappeared. And I was on a strand, on a beachfront. And while I was there, I stared out into the ocean, the long horizon line stretching. It was neither dawn or dusk. There wasn't even a sun out, but there was light. And while I was there, I was just staring and staring, looking at the horizon, knowing that something was coming, having that feeling. And then I started to see the horizon wave and undulate and continuously move, more and more forcefully, until finally I saw it rise very violently, as high as possible, until I couldn't see the sky beyond it. I knew it was a tsunami. And that tsunami, at that point, I was not afraid, nor was I startled or surprised or had any emotion of the sort. I was perplexed, almost confused, and I was trying to figure out how to deal with the problem, how to deal with the issue in front of me. How do I get past? How do I escape this tsunami? And at that time, my only response, my only solution was to try to run away. And so I did that. And as I began to run away, the strand started to change. The sand itself became different colors. First, it was like a tan. And then from the tan, it turned into a gold. And then from the gold into a white. And then suddenly, a gray. And when the gray sand became, or when it appeared, tsunami fell on me. And when it fell on me, I started to roll, and roll, and roll, and roll, and then to whirl, almost like a whirlpool. And I was sucked down. And I woke up. The second time I had the dream, it was whenever I was living in Houston. I was finishing up high school. I was about midway through the year. And the dream hit me. I was in a city. A large metropolitan city. Almost futuristic. Everything was brilliant. Everything was chrome. Everything was steel. And everything was glass. Everything was pristine and beautiful. But there were no people. There was no one there. Through the entirety of the city, as I kept ambling around, wandering around, looking and looking, I wasn't looking for people. I was just amazed with the very sight before my eyes. Huge constructions and the architecture that stretched and bent in ways that are impossible. But I did notice there was nobody there. And eventually I got to this point where I went to the limits of the city, the outskirts. It was a dock, or really, it was a dam. It was a gigantic wall that beyond it was only sea. And the sea stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched. And I looked at the horizon. And at that point, it was neither dusk nor dawn, nor was it midday. And the color this time was a light gray. And though there wasn't a sun in the sky, it was still light. And as I looked out, the same thing occurred. At first, it began to move slightly, ever so slightly, and then it began to undulate and undulate and undulate, and then suddenly it shot up. And again, a great wall of water. And it kept coming and coming and coming, getting closer and closer. And the same feeling I had, I wasn't scared, I wasn't astonished, I was just perplexed. I was trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I get away from this thing? How do I escape it? And this time, I had the idea of going over it. And I began to float, not fly, but float. and I started to float higher and higher and higher. But the higher that I went, the higher the tsunami got. And the same thing, it got to the point where I couldn't even see the sky above it. Until finally, it fell on top of me. Completely cascaded on top of me. And the same thing happened. I began to roll and roll and roll. And then whirl and swirl and spin. And I was sucked down. And I woke up. And then, the last time that I've had this dream, I was already 19. I was on my way out of Kentucky when I had already been working in the Coast Guard for about a year and a half. And it was before I left Kentucky where I was going to go home, and then after going home I was going to go to California to do some training. I had this dream. And what happened in that dream is that I was in the barracks that I was living in. And I had a large window right over my bed. And so I woke up in the dream from my bed. And first I looked around in my room and I noticed that my room was completely empty. And in it being completely empty, I was a little worried. I was like, where'd all my stuff go? And because it was so realistic, I thought I had actually woken up. And I had thought that my co-workers and my friends at the time, they had played a trick on me and they just took everything out. But then I looked out the window and I saw that it was just a screen. It was just white. There was nothing beyond it. And so then it clicked to me. I'm in a dream. And so normally that I've been able to have lucid dreams, I try to control and manipulate things. So I try to get out of the rooms that I'm in. And I was able to push myself, just phase through the door as if I was a ghost. And I looked down the barracks hall, or just the hall. And I thought about walking down over to the kitchen to see what I could see, because this was the way out, and over there was the kitchen. So I went to my left and I turned to the kitchen, and there was a big glass window, which normally there was a window there, but then it was much larger. And then I started stepping towards it. I noticed there was no glass, and it was just a cliff. And from that cliff, an abyss. But that abyss wasn't black, it was azure. It was a very bright blue, and it just went on and on and on into infinity. And then I looked out before me again. The whole room, the barracks that I was in, disappeared, and I was standing on nothing. And I saw a horizon splitting the infinity, splitting the infinite sky. And that same horizon started to undulate and undulate and undulate. I started to notice that here, it was dawn and dusk. They were both happening at the same time. The different colors of clouds were appearing all around. And as it was undulating and undulating, it shot up again. And this time, the same sensation. Wondering, how do I figure this out? What do I do? I've tried to run away. I've tried to go over it. So what now? And as it came closer and closer and closer and closer, at that point, the only thing I could do was go through it. And that's exactly what I did. And since then, I've never had the dream again.